Good afternoon. I chose the movie Argo for my project today. Argo is a 2012 American historical drama thriller filmed by the actor Ben Affleck. The screenplay was written by Chris Terrio and was adapted from a 1999 book of the same name by based off of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency operative called Tony Mendez. Following the Iranian Revolution, the American embassy and staff were taken hostage. Despite the humiliation, America found it did not have the option of turning its back on that part of the world. The CIA came along with a shot of optimism in this retelling of the true story of a veteran operative and its plan to sneak Americans out of the country. More specifically, this takes place in Iran. To protect the hostages that were in Iran from retaliation, the U.S. involvement in the rescue had to be suppressed. And full credit is given to the Canadian government and its ambassador who shut down his embassy and left Iran with his wife as the operation was underway. The ambassador's Iranian housekeeper, who had known about the Americans, lied to the revolutionaries to protect them and escaped to Iraq. Mendez is awarded the Intelligence Star, but due to the mission and its classified nature, he receives a medal in secret and has to return it afterwards. The award was restored to him in 1997. More specifically, actually, in terms of the plot of the movie, Iran is presented throughout the movie as a kind of a middle-class mercantile place. For the most part, they do show a lot of nasty images, almost like barbaric in a way, more than just the middle class. They also showed a lot of lower class citizens who were clearly impoverished, and based off of that poverty, what the movie portrayed was that the people of Iran were tired of that poverty and they wanted a new government, which is what they currently have, and they have had since the late 70s. Stemming from this revolution. While this was all going on, when they were trying to overthrow the government at that time, the American embassy was still there, and the Canadian embassy was still there, and they had to figure out a way to get the Americans out somehow. And they did this with the help of the Canadian government. And like I said, the way that they portrayed Iran was very differently to what we're used to seeing in a way, but they still left that barbaric attitude, the imagery. And this is something that I've noticed personally when watching movies in the Middle East. They put almost like a yellow filter or like an orange filter to make it seem kind of exotic in a way. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but those kind of filters on the images we're seeing on television, they kind of set a tone, kind of like a society that's distant from us, that we can't really connect to. But anyway, after watching this film, it's clear that, like most Western films about the Middle East, that it perpetuates basic myths about the Middle East, and it's that a lot of them might be, there are some that are wealthy, or by corrupt means, or they are barbaric and uncultured. There's kind of no in between both of them, and this movie really does portray that throughout. Like, there's no in between. There's like a huge gap between inequality. And that also things like maniacs and acts of terrorism are also portrayed throughout the movie. And these are just stereotypes, and most of them are incorrect or blown out of proportion. In America, they like to portray foreigners, like African Americans, are sluggish, or Hispanics are filthy, or Jewish people are according to some racists are greedy, or Italians are criminals, and Arabs and Middle Easterners aren't exempt from any of that xenophobia or racism, unfortunately. The truth is, like any other group or ethnic group or nationality, people from Iran or Arabic people or Persian people are made up of fine, decent people. There's a little bit of everything, just like any culture would have. Not everybody's the same, and to consider it all the same would be a generalization. If I were to redo the movie, I would do it in a little bit more realistic way in terms of what people felt at that time, and what that government, before the theocracy was put in place, or before that Iranian revolution was put in place, what those people were going through in order for this revolution to take place. Things don't just happen for no reason. There's a reason why that happened. Maybe it was inequality, and it led to this radicalism and this dramatic change in government that maybe in the end didn't benefit the country overall. But there's a reason why things happen in the way that they happen. And I feel like the movie didn't talk about, or not enough at least, as to what the majority of Iranians were going through at that time in terms of like inequality. I think originally, at least not from what the movie was portrayed as, it was portraying people mostly being angry at the wealthy, more than it being a religious thing. And I feel like often Americans tend to focus more on the religious divisions, and that being the sole cause of issues. And I'm not saying that they're not a cause or a contribute to any issues that might exist in the Middle East. I believe that there's more to it, and I think that in this case, wealth inequality had a lot to do with it, and that there was a lot of corruption prior to the revolution. Not to say that there isn't any corruption today, but that corruption at that time that led all these wealthy people to have this much money left a lot of impoverished people that were made up the majority of the country, that eventually led Iran to this kind of theocracy and radical change of government that arguably may oppress women in the views of some. So yeah, if I had to change something, it would be more on the focus of what kind of happened after. Like, why did this happen? Why did it lead up to this theocracy? The theocracy didn't just happen because it happened. There was a movement that came for it. And in the movie, they kind of graze it a little bit. There's one character who is a maid, a housekeeper. She grew up within the family. Her son grew up, and she became very resentful of that family that took her in at that time. And I remember they had a confrontation, and because they were the person's house was being taken away, and the housekeeper told her she deserved it. So clearly there was a resentment between classes, social classes. And the perspective of the movie, lastly, I do want to address, as I haven't really dived into it enough, is the fact that the movie is told from a Western point of view. So I feel like for it being told from a Western point of view, and it is a Hollywood movie, it did a decent job of displaying what occurred at that time in terms of what I've read, what occurred with the Iranian Revolution. I think that there's still a little bit more to it in terms of how it got there, because I also feel like it was very sympathetic to the people, to the wealthy people that were there at that time. Yes, they did get their items stolen. Yes, they may not have deserved it, but there was a reason to why these things occurred. There was a certain unhappiness in terms of the inequality that existed, and that might still exist or might even be worse, but that's what led up to what we see in Iran today. And that is the end of my presentation, and I thank you very much for whoever listens to this. Thank you.